Marcus Williams never expected his last act of kindness would cost him everything, or that 10 minutes later, his world would change forever when a billionaire walked through those same doors. The lunch rush at Bellecourt restaurant had died down to its usual Tuesday afternoon lull when 8-year-old Zara pressed her small face against the spotless glass window. Her breath fogged the surface as she stared at the perfectly plated dishes being carried past tables of well-dressed diners. Marcus Williams caught sight of her from behind the gleaming stainless steel counter of the open kitchen. Something about the way she stood there, shoulders hunched, worn sneakers barely touching the sidewalk, made him pause mid-chop. He'd been working as head chef at this upscale downtown restaurant for 3 years, and he'd seen plenty of people window shopping for meals they couldn't afford. But this was different. Ready for the complete story? Smash that subscribe button and tell me where you are tuning in from in the comments. Tomorrow brings another mind-blowing story that's just as unbelievable. Trust me, you will want to be here for it. Alright, let's jump into it. The little girl's clothes hung loose on her thin frame, clean but obviously second-hand. Her dark curls were pulled back in a ponytail secured with what looked like a rubber band, and she clutched a small backpack against her chest like it contained everything she owned. Chef Williams. The sharp voice of restaurant manager Bradley Hoffman cut through Marcus's concentration. Table 6 is still waiting for their appetizers. Coming right up, Marcus replied, but his eyes drifted back to the window. The girl was gone. 20 minutes later, as Marcus was plating the last of the evening prep, he saw her again. This time she was sitting on the bench across the street, backpack beside her, staring at the restaurant with an expression that made his chest tighten. He recognized that look. He'd worn it himself as a kid in Detroit, when his grandmother worked double shifts and dinner was whatever they could scrape together. The dinner crowd began filtering in. Couples in designer clothes, business people closing deals over wine that cost more than most people made in a day. Marcus moved through his routine with practiced efficiency, but every few minutes, his gaze found its way to that bench. She was still there at 7, still there at 8. At 8:45 p.m., Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He prepared a simple meal, nothing fancy, just what any hungry kid would love. Grilled chicken strips, perfectly seasoned fries, and a small garden salad with ranch dressing. He added a chocolate chip cookie from the dessert station and poured fresh orange juice into a to-go cup. "Where are you going with that?" Bradley's voice stopped him at the kitchen door. Marcus turned, the takeout bag warm in his hands. "Just stepping out for some air." "With food?" "It's my dinner break." Bradley's eyes narrowed. "That better not be for the street kid I've been watching you eyeing all evening. This is an upscale establishment, Marcus. We can't have vagrants hanging around, because word gets out we're giving away free meals. She's just a little girl. She's bad for business. I already called the police to move her along." Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach. "You called the cops on an 8-year-old? "I called them on someone loitering and panhandling outside my restaurant." Through the window, Marcus could see a police cruiser pulling up to the curb. The little girl noticed it too and started gathering her things, fear evident in every movement. Marcus didn't think. He pushed past Bradley and walked straight out the front door. The police officer was already approaching the bench when Marcus reached the girl. She looked up at him with wide, dark eyes that seemed far too old for her face. "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" he asked gently, crouching down to her level. She nodded, not trusting her voice. "I'm Marcus. I work in that kitchen over there. I made you something." He held out the bag, and she took it with trembling hands. "Officer, is there a problem here?" Marcus stood as the policeman approached. "Got a call about someone bothering the customers at this restaurant." Marcus glanced back at Bellacourt, where Bradley stood in the doorway with his arms crossed. Just a misunderstanding. This young lady was just leaving, weren't you, sweetheart? The girl nodded quickly, clutching the food bag. What's your name? Marcus asked. Zara, she whispered. Where are your parents, Zara? Her eyes filled with tears. Mama's been sleeping for 3 days. I tried to wake her up, but she won't. And I got really hungry, and I remembered Mama always said when we had money to come to the nice restaurants where the food looks pretty. Marcus felt the world tilt beneath his feet. This wasn't just a hungry kid. This was a child whose mother was possibly dead or seriously ill, and she'd been taking care of herself for 3 days. The police officer's entire demeanor changed. Honey, can you tell us where you live? As Zara began explaining in her small, scared voice, Marcus saw Bradley storming across the street, his face red with anger. Marcus, what the hell do you think you're doing? Get back inside right now. This child needs help, Marcus said firmly. This child is not our problem. You're representing this restaurant right now wearing that uniform, and I will not have. The child's mother appears to be in medical distress, the police officer interrupted. We need to get social services involved immediately. As the officer made his radio call, a black sedan pulled up behind the police cruiser. A woman in an expensive suit got out, her phone pressed to her ear. She looked directly at Zara, said something urgent into the phone, and began walking quickly toward them. Zara, the woman called out, and the little girl's head snapped up. Ms. Peterson? Zara's voice was barely a whisper. Marcus watched in confusion as the woman, clearly someone with authority and money, approached their small group. I've been looking everywhere for you, Ms. Peterson said, kneeling beside Zara. When you didn't show up at school yesterday or today, and no one could reach your mother. You know this child? The officer asked. I'm Jennifer Peterson, principal at Riverside Elementary. Zara is one of our students. Her mother, Diana, has been struggling since losing her job last month. We've been trying to connect them with resources, but... She looked at the food bag in Zara's hands, then at Marcus. Did you give this to her? She was hungry, Marcus said simply. Marcus! Bradley's voice was a harsh whisper. I need you inside. Now. But Marcus couldn't move. He was watching Ms. Peterson's face as she processed the situation, seeing the wheels turning. Officer, I need to check on Diana immediately. If she's been unresponsive for 3 days. She looked at Zara with gentle eyes. Sweetheart, you've been taking care of yourself this whole time. Zara nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks now. Ms. Peterson, Zara whispered, I used the last money Mama gave me for the bus to come here. I thought maybe if I looked hungry enough, someone nice would help. Mama always said there were still good people in the world. The weight of that statement hit everyone at once. This 8-year-old had strategically positioned herself outside an upscale restaurant, hoping someone's compassion would kick in. She'd been surviving on her own for 3 days, taking care of a mother who couldn't respond, and had finally made the desperate decision to seek help from strangers. Bradley grabbed Marcus's arm. That's it. You're fired. Pack your knives and get out. I don't care about this sob story. You violated company policy, you ignored direct orders, and you've made a spectacle of my restaurant. The second climax hit like a punch to the gut. Marcus stared at his boss, then at Zara, who was watching the exchange with growing distress. You're firing him? Ms. Peterson stood slowly, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. This man just potentially saved a child's life, and you're firing him? Ma'am, this is restaurant business. This is human decency. She turned to Marcus. What's your name? Marcus Williams. She pulled out her phone and took a photo of his name tag, then another of the restaurant's sign. "Mr. Williams, I want you to know that what you did tonight, regardless of the consequences, was the right thing. That little girl needed help, and you gave it without hesitation." Marcus felt his throat tighten. 3 years of work gone. His reputation in the local restaurant scene probably destroyed. And for what? For doing what any decent human being would do. "Pack your stuff," Bradley said coldly. "Security will escort you out." As Marcus walked back toward the restaurant, he heard Ms. Peterson on her phone. "I need an ambulance at 847 Maple Street immediately. Possible medical emergency involving an unresponsive adult. And I need a social worker dispatched to Bellacourt Restaurant downtown. We have a child in crisis." The last thing Marcus saw before entering the restaurant was Zara waving goodbye to him, still clutching the bag of food he'd given her, while Ms. Peterson wrapped a protective arm around her shoulders. He had no idea that in exactly 10 minutes, his entire world would change forever. What do you think should happen to Marcus? Was he right to risk his job, or should he have found another way to help? Let me know in the comments below. Marcus stood in the empty employee locker room, methodically packing his knife roll, the tools that had been his livelihood for over a decade. Each blade told a story. The santoku his grandmother had given him when he graduated culinary school, the boning knife he'd saved 3 months to buy, the worn paring knife that had seen him through countless prep shifts. His phone buzzed. A text from his landlord. "Rent's due tomorrow. Hope the restaurant business is treating you well." Marcus closed his eyes. Without this job, he had maybe 2 weeks before eviction. The restaurant industry was small in this city. Word would spread fast that he'd been fired for insubordination and poor judgment. Bradley would make sure of that, but when he pictured Zara's face, the way she'd looked at him with such gratitude for a simple meal, he couldn't bring himself to regret his choice. A security guard appeared in the doorway. "Time to go, chef." Marcus shouldered his knife bag and walked through the kitchen one last time. The other cooks avoided eye contact. They had families to feed, bills to pay. They couldn't afford to show solidarity with someone who'd just been made an example of. The main dining room was nearly empty now, just a few late diners finishing their meals. Through the front window, Marcus could see the police cruiser was gone, along with Ms. Peterson's sedan. He hoped Zara was safe, that her mother was okay. As he pushed through the front door, the cool evening air hit his face. He'd walked out of restaurants before, usually to something better. This time felt different. This time felt final. "Excuse me, are you Marcus Williams?" Marcus turned to find a man in an expensive charcoal suit standing beside a gleaming black Tesla. The man was tall, probably mid-50s, with graying temples and intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Everything about him screamed money and power, from his Italian leather shoes to the Patek Philippe watch glinting at his wrist. "Who's asking?" Marcus replied cautiously. "My name is Daniel Cross." The man extended a hand. "I own Cross Industries." Marcus had heard of Cross Industries. Everyone in the city had. Tech company worth billions, with fingers in everything from renewable energy to real estate development. Daniel Cross was the kind of man who had buildings named after him. "I'm sorry, Mr. Cross, but if you're looking for catering or something, I just lost my job. You'll need to talk to the management inside. I know you lost your job. I know why you lost your job. And I'm not here about catering." Daniel's expression softened. "I'm here about Zara." The world seemed to stop spinning. "You know Zara? She's my daughter." Marcus felt like he'd been hit by a truck. "Your daughter?" But she was hungry alone, her mother. "Diana Martinez. My ex-wife." Daniel's voice carried a weight of pain and regret. "We've been divorced for 2 years." Diana got full custody after a very ugly legal battle. She changed her name back, moved across town, and made it clear I wasn't welcome in Zara's life unless it was my court-ordered weekend visits. Marcus stared at him. The little girl sitting on that bench, hungry and scared, is the daughter of a billionaire? A billionaire who hasn't been allowed to see his daughter in 3 weeks because her mother claimed I was interfering with their routine. Daniel ran a hand through his hair. Diana filed a restraining order last month. Completely baseless, but it tied up everything in legal red tape. I've been fighting it through lawyers while my little girl... His voice broke slightly. While my little girl was taking care of her unconscious mother and living on whatever scraps she could find. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. She was starving because she couldn't contact you. The restraining order included no phone contact. Diana disconnected their landline. And Zara doesn't have a cell phone. Diana thought she was too young. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. My daughter was literally starving 20 minutes from my office while I was stuck in legal proceedings, trying to prove I wasn't the monster my ex-wife painted me as in court. Mr. Williams, Daniel continued, his voice gaining strength, when Ms. Peterson called me tonight, she's had my emergency contact information from the school, and told me what happened. I realized something. In 3 hours of legal proceedings last week, not one person in that courtroom showed more genuine concern for my daughter's well-being than a complete stranger did in 3 minutes on a sidewalk. Marcus didn't know what to say. This whole situation felt surreal. Diana's in the hospital now, Daniel went on. Severe dehydration and malnutrition, ironically. She'd been rationing their food to make sure Zara ate, but it wasn't enough. She collapsed 3 days ago, and Zara couldn't wake her up. An 8-year-old has been surviving alone for 3 days because her pride and her mother's hatred of me was more important than swallowing that pride and calling for help. Is she going to be okay? Diana will recover. She's stable now. Daniel pulled out his phone and showed Marcus a photo. Zara in a hospital room, clean and wearing fresh clothes, curled up asleep in a chair beside a woman's hospital bed. Zara's safe, federal clean, and for the first time in months, she's with both her parents. Marcus felt relief flood through him. That's good. That's what matters. No, Mr. Williams. That's not all that matters. Daniel stepped closer. What matters is that my daughter was saved by a man who risked his livelihood to help a stranger's child. What matters is that while I was paying lawyers $800 an hour to fight a custody battle, you were handing my daughter a meal and making sure she felt human dignity in what was probably the worst moment of her young life. Daniel reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. I've been looking for an executive chef for the flagship restaurant in my new hotel development. 5-star establishment, complete creative control, salary that's... He named a figure that made Marcus's knees nearly buckle. The job comes with benefits, equity in the restaurant, and a signing bonus that should cover any immediate financial concerns you might have. Marcus stared at the card, then at Daniel. You're offering me a job? I'm offering you the job you deserve. The job someone with your character and your skills should have. Daniel's voice grew firm. But more than that, I'm offering you the chance to be part of my daughter's life, if you're willing. Because tonight, when everyone else saw a problem to be managed or removed, you saw a child who needed help. And in my book, that makes you family. The card felt impossibly heavy in Marcus's hands. Everything he'd lost 10 minutes ago, his job, his financial security, his future, was being handed back to him 100-fold. Why? He whispered. Because kindness is the rarest ingredient in any recipe, Mr. Williams. And you've got it in abundance. Daniel smiled for the first time that evening. Besides, Zara specifically asked if the nice chef who gave her the good food could come visit her in the hospital. Apparently, she's been saving half that chocolate chip cookie to share with you. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. She saved half the cookie? Even when she was starving, she thought about sharing with the person who showed her kindness. Daniel's voice was soft now. That's the daughter I've been fighting to protect. That's the little girl who needed you tonight, and who's going to need good people like you in her life going forward. Marcus looked back at Bellacourt Restaurant, where Bradley was probably already posting his job online and bad-mouthing him to anyone who'd listen. Then he looked at the business card and at Daniel Cross, a father who'd just gotten his daughter back, offering a second chance to the stranger who'd helped save her. "When do I start?" Marcus asked. "Have you ever had a moment where doing the right thing seemed to cost you everything, only to discover it was actually opening a door to something better? Share your story below. Sometimes our biggest losses lead to our greatest gains." 3 days later, Marcus stood in the gleaming kitchen of Cross Hotel's flagship restaurant, Meridian. The space was a chef's dream: custom German appliances, marble prep stations, and a wine cellar that probably cost more than most restaurants' entire inventory. But despite the luxury surrounding him, Marcus's mind was elsewhere. He was thinking about the hospital visit yesterday. Zara had been sitting cross-legged on her hospital bed, carefully breaking that saved cookie in half when he walked in. The way her face had lit up, pure joy, no calculation, no agenda, had hit him harder than any review or accolade he'd ever received. "Mr. Marcus," she'd squealed, holding out her portion of the cookie. "I saved it just like I promised." They'd shared that cookie while Daniel spoke quietly with doctors about Diana's recovery and the custody arrangements that were being fast-tracked given the circumstances. Zara had chattered about everything: her favorite foods, her drawings, how the hospital jello wasn't nearly as good as the meal Marcus had made her. "Are you going to cook for me again?" she'd asked with the direct honesty only children possess. "Would you like me to?" Marcus had replied, "Yes, but—" her expression had grown serious. "But can you make food for other hungry kids too? There's this boy at my school, Jeremy, and sometimes he doesn't have lunch, and—" Even after everything she'd been through, Zara was thinking about other people's hunger. Now, as Marcus reviewed the menu plans Daniel had given him complete creative freedom over, he found himself designing more than just a restaurant. He was designing a legacy. "Chef Williams?" A woman's voice interrupted his thoughts. He turned to see Diana Martinez, standing in the kitchen doorway. She looked fragile but determined, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail that reminded him of Zara. "Ms. Martinez, I wasn't expecting. Are you feeling better?" "Much, thank you." She stepped into the kitchen, looking around with obvious discomfort. "This is impressive." An awkward silence stretched between them. Marcus had no idea what to say to the woman whose pride had nearly cost her daughter's life, whose hatred of her ex-husband had created the circumstances that led to that terrifying night. "I came to thank you," Diana said quietly, "and to apologize." "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." Her voice grew stronger. "What happened to Zara, what I let happen to Zara, there's no excuse for it. I was so angry at Daniel, so determined to prove I didn't need his help, that I nearly—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Marcus waited, sensing there was more. "The truth is," Diana continued, "I've been struggling since the divorce. Not just financially, emotionally. Daniel was always the successful one, the one with the big dreams and the money to make them happen. When we split up, I wanted to prove I could give Zara everything she needed without his help. But you lost your job. I lost my job because I was too proud to ask for references from companies associated with Daniel's business ventures. I turned down job offers because they came through his network. I moved us across town to get away from his world, which meant leaving the support system we'd built. Diana's eyes filled with tears. My pride nearly killed my daughter. There's something else you should know, Diana said, reaching into her purse. She pulled out a worn notebook and handed it to Marcus. Zara's been keeping a journal since the divorce. The hospital social worker thought you should see this. Marcus opened the notebook to pages covered in 8-year-old handwriting and crayon drawings. The entries made his heart ache. Day 47 since Daddy moved out. Mama cried again. I made her tea like Daddy used to. Day 93. Mama says we don't need Daddy's money, but she looks at the bills and gets that worried face. Day 156. I pretended I wasn't hungry at lunch, so Mama wouldn't feel bad about the peanut butter running out. Day 203. I drew a picture of our family together, but Mama got upset, so I hid it. The final entry was dated 3 days ago. Mama won't wake up. I'm scared, but I remember Daddy always said there are good people everywhere if you know how to look. I'm going to find a good person today. Underneath was a crayon drawing of Marcus handing her the bag of food, with good person written in careful block letters above his stick figure head. Marcus looked up to find Diana watching him, tears streaming down her face. She never stopped believing in goodness, Diana whispered. Even when her mother was failing her, even when she was hungry and scared, she believed someone would help. Kids are resilient, Marcus said gently. No, Diana shook her head. Kids are hopeful. There's a difference. And you proved her hope was justified. Diana. Daniel's voice came from the kitchen entrance. Both Marcus and Diana turned to see him standing there with Zara, who was carrying a small backpack and wearing a bright yellow dress. Daddy brought me to see the kitchen, Zara announced, running to Marcus. He said you're going to cook here every day. That's right, sweetheart. Marcus knelt down to her level. What do you think? It's beautiful. But she looked around with the serious expression she got when she was thinking hard. It's really big. Are you going to cook for a lot of people? I hope so. Good people who are hungry? Marcus glanced up at Daniel, who was watching the exchange with a soft smile. All kinds of people who are hungry. Diana, Daniel said carefully, I didn't expect to see you here. The tension in the room was immediately palpable. Zara looked between her parents with the hypervigilant awareness children develop when they're used to managing adult emotions. I came to thank Mr. Williams, Diana said, and to talk to you, actually. Daniel raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I want to drop the restraining order, Diana continued. I want to work out a real custody arrangement. Not because the lawyers are pushing it, not because of what happened, but because... She looked at Zara, then at Marcus. Because watching a complete stranger care more about our daughter's immediate well-being than either of us were managing to do was a wake-up call I can't ignore. More than that, Diana's voice grew stronger. I want to help with whatever this is going to be. She gestured around the kitchen. Daniel, I know you. This isn't just about opening another restaurant. You've got some bigger plans brewing. Daniel looked at Marcus, then at Zara, then back at Diana. How well do you remember me? Well enough to know that look in your eyes. You get it when you're about to change something big. Diana almost smiled. What are you planning? Daniel picked up Zara, settling her on his hip, a gesture so natural it was clear he'd been missing it desperately. Tell them about our idea, princess. We're going to make a place where kids like Jeremy can come eat when they're hungry. Zara announced proudly. And kids like me who get scared and don't know where their daddies are. And we're going to teach people how to cook good food like Mr. Marcus. Marcus felt his breath catch. A community kitchen? More than that, Daniel said. A community center built around food. Cooking classes for low-income families. Free meals for kids after school. Job training programs for people trying to get into the restaurant industry. And at the center of it all, he looked at Marcus. A man who proved that kindness is the most important ingredient in any recipe. Diana was staring at her ex-husband with an expression Marcus couldn't read. You're serious? Dead serious. I've already secured the property, that empty lot 2 blocks from Zara's school. Construction starts next month. Daniel's eyes never left Diana's face. But I can't do it without help. Real help. From people who understand what it means to struggle, to be proud, to make mistakes and learn from them. You're offering me a job? Diana asked quietly. I'm offering you a partnership. Community outreach, program development, family services coordination. Daniel's voice was careful, professional. It would mean working together, closely, for Zara's vision as much as anything else. The kitchen fell silent except for the hum of refrigeration units and the distant sound of construction in other parts of the hotel. Marcus watched the 3 of them, a fractured family navigating toward something that might be healing or might be more hurt. Zara looked between her parents with an expression far too wise for her 8 years. Does this mean we can all eat dinner together sometimes? Like we used to? Daniel and Diana exchanged a look loaded with 2 years of hurt, lawyers, custody battles, and stubborn pride. But underneath it all, Marcus could see something else. The foundation of whatever had brought them together in the first place. Still there, still solid enough to build on. Maybe, baby girl, Diana said softly. Maybe we can figure out how to do that. 2 months later, Marcus stood in the half-constructed community center, watching Zara carefully measure flour into a mixing bowl. The space was still rough, exposed beams, concrete floors, the smell of sawdust and fresh paint, but it already felt alive with possibility. Is this enough, Mr. Marcus? Zara held up the measuring cup with the intense concentration she brought to every cooking lesson. Perfect. Now, what's the most important thing about making bread? Patience, she announced proudly, then immediately contradicted herself by bouncing on her toes. But can we make the fast kind today? I want to show Mama and Daddy when they get back from their meeting. The meeting. Marcus glanced toward the temporary office space where Daniel and Diana had been closeted with architects and city planners for the past 3 hours. Their working relationship had been complicated, professional on the surface, but charged with an undercurrent of unresolved history that everyone could feel. We can make quick bread, Marcus agreed. But while we wait for it to bake, you can practice your knife skills with those vegetables. The safe way with the claw grip, Zara recited, demonstrating the proper hand position. That's my girl. She beamed at the praise, then grew serious. Mr. Marcus, are Mama and Daddy going to keep fighting? Marcus paused in his own prep work. Over the past 2 months, as they'd planned this community center, he'd watched Daniel and Diana navigate an intricate dance of co-parenting and business partnership. Some days were better than others. What makes you think they're fighting? They use their polite voices. When people really like each other, they don't have to be so polite all the time. Zara began carefully chopping carrots, her small hands surprisingly steady. Like you and Ms. Jennifer don't use polite voices. Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Jennifer Peterson had become a regular presence at the community center planning sessions, offering insights about child development and educational programming. She'd also become something else. Something Marcus wasn't quite ready to name. Ms. Jennifer and I are friends, he said carefully. Mama says that's how it starts. Being friends first. Zara glanced up at him with knowing eyes that reminded him forcefully of her father. She says that's what she and Daddy forgot how to do. Before Marcus could respond, raised voices echoed from the office space. Can't just unilaterally decide to expand the program without consulting. Trying to consult you, but you shut down every suggestion I make. Not shutting you down, I'm being realistic about the budget. Always about money with you, Daniel. Some things are more important. The voices cut off abruptly, followed by an uncomfortable silence. Zara's chopping slowed. They're doing it again. Marcus set down his whisk and walked over to her. Hey, look at me. She met his eyes, her own suspiciously bright. Your parents love you more than anything in the world. That's never going to change, no matter what happens between them. You know that, right? I know. But, her voice got very small. I liked it better when we were all together. Even when they were sad, at least we were together sad. Marcus felt his heart break a little. Sometimes adults need time to figure out how to be the best versions of themselves. That doesn't mean they love you any less. Is that why you don't have a family? Because you're still figuring out how to be the best version of yourself. The question hit him like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes. That's a very wise question, sweetheart. Jennifer would make a good mama, Zara said matter-of-factly, returning to her vegetables. She's got kind eyes, and she knows how to make people feel better when they're sad. And she looks at you the way Daddy used to look at Mama, before everything got complicated. Marcus was saved from responding by the appearance of Daniel and Diana, both looking professionally composed but personally strained. How's the cooking lesson going? Diana asked, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. We're making bread, Zara announced. And Mr. Marcus is teaching me about patience, which is apparently harder than knife skills. Speaking of patience, Daniel said, his voice carefully neutral, your mother and I need to discuss some timeline adjustments for the center. Marcus caught the subtext immediately. They'd been fighting about more than just the budget. Why don't you two go talk? Marcus suggested. Zara and I can handle things here. Actually, Diana said, I think we could use a third perspective. Marcus, you've been involved in this project from the beginning. What's your opinion on expanding the job training program to include business development classes? Marcus looked between them, recognizing the trap. This wasn't really about his opinion. This was about Diana and Daniel using him as a referee in whatever larger argument they were having. I think, he said carefully, that any decision that big should be made by people who can have a conversation without raising their voices in front of their daughter. Both parents had the grace to look ashamed. You're right, Daniel said quietly. We're sorry, Princess. Daddy and Mama are still learning how to work together. Are you learning how to be friends again, too? Zara asked with devastating directness. The silence that followed was loaded with 2 years of hurt feelings, legal battles, and stubborn pride. We're trying, Diana said finally. The moment was interrupted by Jennifer Peterson walking through the construction entrance, carrying a stack of papers and looking unusually flustered. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said, but we have a problem. The city council is calling an emergency hearing about the community center permit. What kind of problem? Daniel asked, immediately shifting into business mode. Apparently, someone filed a complaint claiming the center will increase crime in the neighborhood and lower property values. Jennifer's expression was grim. They're threatening to revoke the building permits. That's ridiculous, Diana said. We've done everything by the book. It's not about the book, Jennifer interrupted. I did some digging. The complaint was filed by Hoffman Development Group. Marcus felt ice form in his stomach. Hoffman, as in Bradley Hoffman? His uncle's company. They've been trying to buy up properties in this area for a strip mall development. Jennifer looked at Marcus with sympathy. I think your former boss is using his family connections to cause problems. There's more, Jennifer continued. The hearing is tomorrow morning, and we need community support to counter their claims. But here's the thing. The complaint specifically mentions concerns about unvetted staff with questionable judgment being given access to children. The implication hit Marcus like a sledgehammer. Bradley wasn't just trying to shut down the community center. He was specifically targeting Marcus's involvement, painting his act of kindness as evidence of poor judgment. That bastard, Daniel said quietly, then glanced at Zara. Sorry, princess. It's okay, Daddy. Mr. Marcus taught me some words that are much worse than that. I did not. Marcus protested, grateful for the moment of levity. But the gravity of the situation settled back over them quickly. Tomorrow's hearing could shut down everything they'd been working toward. What do we need to do? Diana asked Jennifer. We need people to show up. Parents, community members, anyone who supports what you're trying to build here. Jennifer looked directly at Marcus. And we need character witnesses. People who can speak to Marcus's integrity and the value of this project. I'll speak, Diana said immediately. Everyone looked at her in surprise. Diana, Daniel said carefully, you don't have to. Yes, I do. Her voice was strong, determined. Marcus saved my daughter's life. More than that, he saved my family. If some vindictive restaurant manager thinks he can destroy that because his ego got bruised, he's about to learn what happens when you mess with a protective mother. She walked over to where Zara was still working on her vegetables and knelt beside her. Baby girl, tomorrow some people are going to try to say that Mr. Marcus isn't a good person and that this kitchen isn't a good idea. What do you think about that? Zara looked up from her cutting board, her expression fierce in a way that reminded Marcus powerfully of both her parents. That's stupid, she said flatly. Mr. Marcus is the goodest person I know, and this kitchen is going to help hungry kids like Jeremy and scared kids like I was. Anyone who doesn't want to help hungry kids is the one with questionable judgment. Can you tell those people that tomorrow? Diana asked gently. You bet I can. Zara's chin lifted with determination. And I still have half that cookie in my treasure box at home. I can show them exactly what kind of person gives food to hungry kids. Marcus felt tears burning his eyes. This 8-year-old was willing to stand up in front of a room full of adults and defend him. Zara, he said softly, you don't have to do that. Yes, I do, she replied, unconsciously echoing her mother. You helped me when I was scared. Now I help you. Daniel cleared his throat. Well then, I guess we have our first witness. Second, Diana corrected. I'm going first. Daniel looked at his ex-wife with an expression Marcus couldn't quite read. Diana. What? Thank you. The two words hung in the air between them, carrying more weight than any of the arguments they'd been having. Don't thank me yet, Diana replied. Wait until you see what I have planned for Mr. Bradley Hoffman. The city council chamber was packed beyond capacity at 9 a.m. sharp. Marcus had arrived early, but he was still surprised by the turnout. The front rows were filled with parents from Riverside Elementary, many holding children who should have been in school. Behind them sat restaurant workers, community volunteers, and neighbors he'd never met, but who had apparently heard about the hearing through social media. Jennifer had been busy. Nervous? Daniel asked, settling into the seat beside Marcus. Terrified, Marcus admitted. I've never been good at public speaking. You won't have to say much. Just tell the truth. Easy for Daniel to say. He'd probably given hundreds of presentations to investors and city officials. Marcus had spent his career in kitchens, where the only audience that mattered was the plate. Diana slid into the row behind them with Zara, who was wearing her best dress and clutching a small wooden box, her treasure box, where she kept the remaining half of that chocolate chip cookie. "Mama says I can't call anyone stupid," Zara whispered to Marcus, "but I can use words like misguided and uninformed. Your mama's very smart." "I know. Daddy's finally remembering that too." Marcus glanced back to see Diana and Daniel exchanging what looked like an encouraging nod. Whatever had happened between them after yesterday's argument, some of the tension seemed to have eased. At precisely 9:15, the council members filed in, followed by Bradley Hoffman and two men in expensive suits, his uncle and their lawyer, Marcus assumed. Bradley's eyes found Marcus immediately, and the smug satisfaction in his expression made Marcus's stomach turn. Council Chairman Roberts called the session to order. "We're here to consider a formal complaint regarding the community center project at 847 Riverside Avenue. Mr. Hoffman, you have the floor." Bradley's uncle, Robert Hoffman, stood and straightened his tie. He was everything Marcus expected, silver-haired, commanding presence, the kind of man who was used to getting his way. "Chairman Roberts, council members, concerned citizens," he began, "we're here today because sometimes good intentions can lead to dangerous outcomes." Marcus felt his jaw clench. The proposed community center, while well-meaning, poses significant risks to our neighborhood. Increased foot traffic, unsupervised gathering spaces, and most concerning, unvetted personnel with access to vulnerable children. Robert Hoffman gestured toward an easel where his lawyer was setting up a presentation board. "Our investigation reveals that the proposed head chef, Marcus Williams, was recently terminated from his position at Bellacourt Restaurant for violating safety protocols and ignoring direct orders from management." The presentation board showed a blown-up photo of Marcus's termination paperwork, along with what looked like an incident report. Mr. Williams exhibited poor judgment by approaching a minor child without permission, removing food from the premises without authorization, and creating a public disturbance that required police intervention. Marcus felt the room's energy shift. When presented that way, his actions did sound questionable. Several council members were taking notes. "Furthermore," Robert Hoffman continued, "this individual's reckless behavior directly contributed to a child being placed in state custody, traumatizing an already vulnerable minor." That was too much. Marcus started to stand, but Daniel's hand on his arm stopped him. "We're not opposed to community programming," Robert Hoffman concluded. "We simply believe our children deserve better oversight than what's being proposed here." The room murmured with concern. Marcus could see doubt creeping across some faces in the audience. Chairman Roberts looked toward their side of the room. "The floor is now open for response. Who will be speaking for the community center project?" Diana stood up. "I will, Chairman Roberts." She walked to the front of the room with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to lose. "My name is Diana Martinez," she began, "and I'm here to tell you about the night Marcus Williams saved my daughter's life." For the next 10 minutes, Diana laid out the truth with surgical precision. Not the sanitized version they'd told social services, but the raw, ugly reality of what had happened. "I was unconscious from malnutrition because I was too proud to ask for help. My 8-year-old daughter had been taking care of me for 3 days, rationing whatever food we had left. She was literally starving, and I wasn't conscious enough to help her." The room was dead silent. Zara made a decision that night. She took our last bus money and went looking for help. She positioned herself outside an upscale restaurant because she believed, hoped, that someone with enough money to eat in nice places might have enough compassion to help a hungry child. Diana's voice grew stronger. Marcus Williams didn't see a problem to be managed or a liability to be removed. He saw a child who needed food, and he gave it to her. No questions asked, no conditions, no bureaucratic delay. Just immediate human compassion. She turned to look directly at Robert Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman says Marcus exhibited poor judgment. I say he exhibited exactly the kind of judgment we should want from anyone working with children. He put a child's immediate safety above administrative convenience. But don't take my word for it, Diana continued. Let me introduce you to someone who can speak for herself about Marcus Williams' character. She gestured toward Zara, who stood up with her treasure box and walked to the front of the room. Several council members leaned forward. This wasn't standard procedure, but no one seemed inclined to stop an 8-year-old. Zara set her treasure box on the podium and looked out at the room with remarkable composure. Hi, I'm Zara Martinez. 3 months ago, I was really scared and really hungry, and Mr. Marcus helped me. She opened her treasure box and carefully removed the wrapped half cookie, now preserved in plastic wrap. This is half of the cookie Mr. Marcus gave me that night. I saved it because even when I was hungry, I wanted to share it with the person who was kind to me. The simple gesture hit the room like a thunderbolt. Several people were visibly tearing up. Mr. Hoffman says Mr. Marcus has questionable judgment, Zara continued, her voice clear and strong. I think someone who calls the police on hungry kids has questionable judgment. I think someone who fires people for helping kids has questionable judgment. She looked directly at Bradley Hoffman, who was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Mr. Marcus could have walked past me. Lots of people did. But he stopped, and he helped, and he made sure I felt like I mattered. That's not questionable judgment. That's what good people do. Zara carefully rewrapped the cookie and placed it back in her box. The community center is going to help kids like me who get scared and don't know where to go. It's going to help kids who are hungry and need someone to notice. And it's going to teach people how to cook good food, so maybe more families won't end up like mine did, too proud to ask for help until it's almost too late. She picked up her treasure box and looked at the council members. If you don't want that in your neighborhood, then I don't understand what kind of neighborhood you want. The room erupted in applause. Chairman Roberts had to use his gavel to restore order. As Zara walked back to her seat, she passed Bradley Hoffman's table. Marcus watched as she stopped and looked up at his former boss. Mr. Hoffman, she said quietly, but in the silence of the chamber, everyone could hear her. I forgive you for firing Mr. Marcus, but I don't understand why you're trying to stop other hungry kids from getting help. Don't you remember what it felt like to be hungry when you were little? Bradley's face went white. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Chairman Roberts called for additional testimony. One by one, people stood up. Jennifer Peterson spoke about the educational value of the programming they'd planned. 3 restaurant workers from other establishments testified to Marcus's professional reputation and character. A mother from Riverside Elementary talked about her son Jeremy, who'd been mentioned in Zara's journal, a quiet kid who often went without lunch. But the testimony that changed everything came from an unexpected source. I'd like to speak. Everyone turned to see an elderly black woman standing in the back of the room. She walked slowly to the front, her cane tapping on the hardwood floor. My name is Dorothy Williams, she said. Marcus is my grandson. Marcus felt his world tilt. His grandmother had driven 4 hours from Detroit to be here. I raised that boy, Dorothy continued, her voice carrying the authority of 8 decades of living. His parents died when he was 7, and he came to live with me. You want to know about his character? That child used to save half his school lunch every day to bring home because he was worried I wasn't eating enough on my Social Security check. She looked around the room, meeting eyes with each council member. He was 8 years old, same age as this little girl here, and he was already thinking about other people's hunger before his own. That's not something you learn in a job training program, folks. That's something you either have or you don't. Dorothy turned to face the Hoffman table. As for this business about poor judgment, let me tell you something about judgment. Good judgment is knowing when the rules matter less than the person in front of you. Good judgment is risking your own security to help someone else's child. Good judgment is building something that makes your community stronger instead of tearing down something that makes it more compassionate. The room was completely silent. This community center isn't just about Marcus Williams, Dorothy concluded. It's about the kind of neighborhood we want to live in. Do we want a place where hungry children are seen as problems to be removed or as people to be helped? Do we want a place where kindness gets punished or where it gets rewarded? She looked directly at Chairman Roberts. That's the choice you're making today. The council chamber remained silent for a long moment after Dorothy Williams returned to her seat. Chairman Roberts looked down at his notes, then at the packed room, then at the presentation board still displaying Marcus's termination paperwork. "Mr. Hoffman," he said finally, addressing Bradley directly, "do you have any response to the testimony we've heard?" Bradley stood slowly, his earlier confidence visibly shaken. Marcus watched his former boss struggle with something, anger, embarrassment, maybe even shame. The safety protocols exist for a reason," Bradley said weakly. "Restaurant liability, food safety regulations." "Mr. Hoffman," Council Member Patricia Chin interrupted, "are you suggesting that giving food to a hungry child violates food safety regulations? It's about proper procedures. It's about a man seeing a starving little girl and doing something about it," Chin replied sharply. "Unless you're telling us that proper procedures would have been to let her continue starving." Bradley's face flushed red. "That's not. We could have called social services." "Social services has a response time of 24 to 48 hours for non-emergency situations," Jennifer Peterson called out from the audience. "That child had been without adequate food for 3 days. Furthermore," Chairman Roberts continued, looking at Robert Hoffman, "I'm concerned about some of the claims in your presentation. You stated that Mr. Williams' actions directly contributed to a child being placed in state custody. Is that accurate?" Robert Hoffman exchanged a glance with his lawyer. "The child was removed from an unsafe home situation. Temporarily," Daniel stood up, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to boardrooms and legal proceedings. "And she was placed with her father, me, not in state custody. The situation was resolved within hours, and the family is now reunited and stable." He walked to the front of the room with the measured confidence Marcus envied. "Chairman Roberts, council members, I'm Daniel Cross, CEO of Cross Industries. I'm also Zara's father." A murmur ran through the room. Everyone knew who Daniel Cross was. "I want to address something Mr. Hoffman said about investigation and vetting." Daniel's voice grew harder. "The investigation into this community center has been thorough and professional. We've exceeded every requirement for background checks, safety protocols, and program oversight." He gestured toward Robert Hoffman. "What we're seeing here isn't concern about community safety. This is a business dispute dressed up as civic responsibility. The Hoffman Development Group has been trying to acquire properties in this area for 18 months for a commercial development project. This community center prevents that acquisition." Daniel pulled out a folder and set it on the podium. I have copies of emails between Hoffman Development and several property owners in this area, offering well above market value, contingent on the community center project being canceled. Robert Hoffman's lawyer was on his feet immediately. Mr. Cross, unless you're prepared to present authenticated documents. I am. Daniel's smile was sharp. I also have copies of the building permits Hoffman Development filed last month for a strip mall on this exact location, dated 2 weeks before their complaint about the community center. The room erupted. Chairman Roberts banged his gavel repeatedly. This is a coordinated effort to use zoning disputes to force a community benefit project out of the way of a commercial development. Daniel continued once order was restored. They're using Marcus Williams as a scapegoat because they know attacking a beloved community project directly would look bad. Bradley Hoffman suddenly stood up. That's enough. Everyone turned to look at him. His uncle was making urgent gestures for him to sit down, but Bradley ignored him. Uncle Robert, stop. Just stop. The room held its breath. This isn't about the development project, Bradley said, his voice barely above a whisper. This is about me being an idiot. He walked to the front of the room, his steps uncertain. When he reached the podium, he looked directly at Marcus for the first time since the hearing began. I fired you because I was embarrassed, he said simply. Not because of food safety or procedures or liability. Because in front of customers and staff, you did something that made me look heartless by comparison. Marcus felt his breath catch. You saw a hungry kid and fed her. I saw a potential problem and called the cops. When people started talking about it, when they started saying how heartless the restaurant management was, I panicked. I thought if I made it about your poor judgment, people would forget about mine. The room was dead silent. The truth is, I've been getting pressure from my uncle about this development for months. He promised me a management position in the new commercial complex if I could help clear the way. So when I heard about your community center, I saw an opportunity to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, get revenge for making me look bad, and help my family's business. Bradley looked around the room, his face flushed with shame. But listening to all of you today, hearing about what that night was really like for Zara, seeing how many people this project is going to help. He shook his head. I can't do it anymore. He turned back to Marcus. You're a better man than I am, Marcus Williams. You always were. That night, you did exactly what any decent human being should do, and I fired you for it because my ego couldn't handle being shown up by someone with actual integrity. Bradley reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded paper. I wrote a letter to every restaurant owner in the city, telling them you were fired for insubordination and poor judgment. I was trying to make sure you couldn't find work anywhere. His voice broke slightly. I'm going to send another letter to every one of them today, telling them the truth about why you were really fired, and recommending they hire you immediately if they have any sense. He set the letter on the podium. Chairman Roberts, I formally withdraw our complaint about the community center. The project has my full support. Robert Hoffman was on his feet, his face purple with rage. Bradley, you don't have the authority. Actually, Uncle Robert, I do. I'm the one who filed the complaint. I'm the only one who can withdraw it. Bradley looked at Zara, who was watching him with wide, serious eyes. Young lady, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I called the police on you that night. I'm sorry I tried to make Mr. Marcus look bad for helping you. And I'm sorry I tried to stop other kids from getting the help they need. Zara stood up and walked to the front of the room. She looked up at Bradley for a long moment, then opened her treasure box again. Mr. Hoffman, she said quietly, do you want to share my cookie? The question hit the room like a lightning bolt. This 8-year-old, who had every reason to hate Bradley Hoffman, was offering to share her most precious possession, the symbol of the kindness he'd tried to destroy. Bradley knelt down so he was at eye level with her. "Sweetheart, that's yours. You saved it for Mr. Marcus." "Mr. Marcus taught me that good food is meant to be shared," Zara replied. "And Mama taught me that when someone says they're sorry and means it, we try to forgive them." She carefully unwrapped the cookie, now just a small, crumbly piece after months of preservation, and broke it into 3 pieces. She gave one to Bradley, one to Marcus, and kept the smallest piece for herself. "Now we all have some," she said simply. Bradley Hoffman, grown man, restaurant manager, part of a family trying to bulldoze a community center, took that piece of stale cookie and ate it with more reverence than Marcus had ever seen anyone show food. When he finished, Bradley was crying. "Thank you," he whispered to Zara. "Thank you for being a better person than any of the adults in this room." Chairman Roberts cleared his throat, his own voice thick with emotion. "Given the withdrawal of the complaint and the testimony we've heard today, I move to approve all permits for the Riverside Community Center project." All in favor? The vote was unanimous. As the gavel came down and the room erupted in cheers, Marcus felt arms wrap around him from all sides: Zara, Diana, Daniel, his grandmother, Jennifer. In the middle of that embrace, he caught sight of Bradley Hoffman shaking hands with his uncle's lawyer and walking away from the table, away from the development deal, away from the easy path that required stepping on other people. The community center was safe. But more than that, something broken had been made whole, not just in one family, but in the understanding between neighbors who had learned to see past their assumptions to the human needs underneath. 6 weeks after the council hearing, Marcus stood in the nearly completed community center kitchen, watching the controlled chaos of opening day preparation. The space had been transformed from concrete and exposed beams into something warm and welcoming. Industrial equipment softened by warm lighting, colorful murals painted by local kids, and the rich smell of fresh bread wafting from the ovens. But despite the excitement buzzing around him, Marcus felt a knot of anxiety in his chest. Today wasn't just about opening the community center. Today was about proving that all the faith people had placed in him was justified. Chef Marcus, Jeremy, the quiet boy from Zara's school who'd inspired this whole program, ran up with a mixing bowl clutched in his small hands. "Is this right?" Marcus examined Jeremy's attempt at pancake batter. The boy had been coming to the pre-opening cooking classes for 2 weeks, and his confidence was growing daily. "That looks perfect, Jeremy. You're getting really good at this. My mom's gonna be so surprised when I make her breakfast tomorrow," Jeremy beamed. "She works the night shift, so she's always tired in the morning." "She's going to love it," Marcus assured him. Across the kitchen, he could see Diana coordinating with the volunteers who'd shown up to help with the grand opening. Her organizational skills had proven invaluable over the past month and a half, but more than that, she'd brought a perspective to the project that neither Marcus nor Daniel had fully grasped. She understood what it meant to need help and be too proud to ask for it. "Marcus." Daniel appeared at his elbow, tablet in hand. "The morning news crew is here for the interview. Are you ready?" "Actually," Marcus said, wiping his hands on his apron, "I don't think I should do the interview." Daniel looked surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, this isn't about me. This is about the kids, the families, the community. Diana should do it. Or Jennifer. Or hell, let Zara do it. She's been the real spokesperson for this project from the beginning." "Marcus," Daniel's voice was patient but firm, "you're the executive chef. You're the one people connect with this story. The interview is important for funding, for community support. For my ego?" Marcus interrupted, then immediately regretted his tone. "Sorry. I keep thinking about what Bradley said at the hearing, about how I made him look bad by comparison. What if that's what this is really about? What if I'm just feeding my own need to be seen as the hero? Daniel studied him for a moment. Is that what you think you're doing? Before Marcus could answer, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. The morning news crew was setting up their equipment, but they weren't alone. A small crowd had gathered, not the planned opening day attendees, but people Marcus didn't recognize. "What's going on?" he asked Jennifer, who was approaching with a concerned expression. "We have some unexpected visitors," she said carefully. "Representatives from 3 other community organizations across the city. They want to talk about replicating this model in their neighborhoods." Marcus felt the knot in his chest tighten. "Already? We haven't even officially opened yet." "Word spreads fast about good things," Jennifer replied, "especially when those good things come with the Cross Industries backing." As if summoned by the mention of his name, Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and frowned. "I need to take this," he said, stepping away. Marcus watched him walk toward the office space, noting the tension in his shoulders. Over the past few weeks, as the community center neared completion, Daniel had been fielding increasing pressure from his business partners about the financial commitment he'd made to the project. Cross Industries was profitable, but it wasn't a charity. The community center represented a significant ongoing expense with no direct return on investment. Some board members were getting nervous. "Marcus," Diana approached, her expression serious. "We need to talk." She led him to a quiet corner of the kitchen, away from the bustle of preparation. "Daniel's been getting pushback from his investors about the long-term funding for this place," she said without preamble. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been paying attention. And because yesterday he asked me if I thought the center could be self-sustaining within 18 months. Marcus felt his stomach drop. "What did you tell him?" "I told him the truth. Community centers like this don't make money, they cost money. That's the whole point. If we could turn a profit helping disadvantaged families, someone would have done it already." "There's something else," Diana continued, her voice dropping lower. "I think Daniel's been using this project to prove something to himself. And to me." "What do you mean?" I think part of why he's thrown so much money and energy into this is because he's trying to show that he's not the selfish, work-obsessed man I divorced. He's trying to prove he can put family and community first." Marcus looked across the kitchen to where Daniel was still on his phone call, his body language increasingly tense. "Is that a bad thing? It is if he's doing it for the wrong reasons. It is if he's trying to buy back our family instead of actually changing." Diana's expression was pained. "Marcus, what if this whole project collapses because it was built on Daniel's guilt instead of sustainable planning?" The question hit Marcus like a physical blow. What if everything they'd built, the hope they'd given to kids like Jeremy and Zara, the trust the community had placed in them, the second chance he'd been given, was all dependent on one man's attempt to win back his ex-wife? Daniel returned from his phone call, his face grim. "We need to talk," he said quietly. "All of us." He led Marcus and Diana to the small office space, closing the door behind them. Through the glass windows, they could see the kitchen continuing its opening day preparations, volunteers arranging tables, kids practicing the recipes they'd learned. "That was the Cross Industries board," Daniel said without preamble. "They're calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "About the community center?" Diana asked. "About my judgment. Apparently, several major investors have concerns about my recent emotional decision-making and its impact on company resources." Daniel's voice was bitter. "They want to discuss restructuring my role in the company." Marcus felt the room spin slightly. "They're trying to remove you?" They're trying to protect their investment. And from their perspective, a CEO who commits millions to a nonprofit venture based on personal circumstances might not be making decisions in the shareholders' best interests. The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. Without Daniel's backing, the community center couldn't survive. Without the community center, all the families who'd started depending on it, Jeremy learning to cook for his working mother, 3 other kids who'd started coming for after-school meals, the job training program that was supposed to start next month, all of it would disappear. "There's more," Daniel continued, his voice almost a whisper. "They specifically mentioned the negative publicity risk of being associated with unstable community partnerships." "What does that mean?" Marcus asked, though he was afraid he already knew. "It means Bradley Hoffman's uncle has been talking to people, spreading a different version of what happened at the council hearing, suggesting that the whole project is built around one man's poor judgment and that it's only a matter of time before something goes wrong." Diana was quiet for a long moment, then asked, "What are you going to tell the board?" Daniel looked at her, then at Marcus, then out at the kitchen where Zara was helping Jeremy measure ingredients for their opening day demonstration. "I don't know," he admitted. "If I fight this, I could lose control of my company. If I don't fight it, I lose everything we've built here. And if you lose the company," Marcus said slowly, "you lose the resources to fight for custody of Zara." The silence that followed was loaded with the weight of impossible choices. Daniel could save his business empire and lose his daughter's respect, or he could fight for the community center and risk losing everything that made it possible in the first place. Through the glass, they watched Zara look around the kitchen, obviously searching for someone. When she spotted them in the office, her face lit up and she waved enthusiastically. "She believes in this place," Diana said softly. "She believes in what we're building here." "So do I," Daniel replied. "That's the problem." Marcus looked at the 2 people who had become more than business partners over the past few months. They'd become family. And he realized that the community center had never really been about the kitchen or the programs or even the kids they were helping. It had been about learning to put other people's needs before your own fears. And tomorrow, they were all going to find out what that really cost. The Cross Industries boardroom at 7 a.m. was a temple to corporate power, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a mahogany table that could seat 20, and portraits of past CEOs staring down with expressions of stern judgment. Marcus had never felt more out of place in his life. He sat beside Daniel at one end of the massive table, still not entirely sure why he'd been asked to attend. Across from them sat 8 board members, their expressions ranging from concerned to openly hostile. At the far end sat Victoria Cross, Daniel's own mother and the company's largest individual shareholder. "Let me be clear about why we're here," said board member Richard Steinberg, his voice cutting through the morning silence. "In the past 6 months, Daniel has committed over $4 million in company resources to a community project without board approval, damaged our relationship with local development partners, and created significant public relations exposure around questionable personnel decisions." Marcus felt heat rise in his cheeks. Even here, even now, his moment of kindness was being painted as a liability. "The question before us," Steinberg continued, "is whether Daniel Cross still has the judgment necessary to lead this company." Daniel stood, his hands steady on the table. "Before we begin, I want everyone to understand something. Marcus Williams is here because this discussion is about more than corporate governance. It's about what kind of company we want to be, and what kind of man you want leading it." He gestured toward Marcus. "This man saved my daughter's life. Not figuratively, not metaphorically, literally. When my ex-wife and I were so busy fighting each other that we lost sight of what mattered, when our legal battles and wounded pride nearly cost our child everything, Marcus Williams stepped in and did what none of us had the courage or clarity to do. Board member Patricia Henley leaned forward. "Daniel, we're not questioning Mr. Williams' character. We're questioning your decision-making process." "Are you?" Daniel's voice sharpened. "Because it seems to me you're questioning whether compassion has a place in business decisions." "Compassion doesn't pay shareholders," Steinberg replied coldly. "Neither does a reputation for heartlessness," Daniel shot back. Victoria Cross, who had been silent until now, tapped her pen once on the table. The room immediately quieted. "Daniel," she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had built this company from nothing, "explain to me how a $4 million charitable commitment serves Cross Industries' interests." Marcus watched Daniel take a deep breath. This was the moment everything hinged on. "Mother, board members, let me tell you about return on investment," Daniel began, his voice gaining confidence. 6 weeks ago, Cross Industries was known for one thing: making money. We were profitable, efficient, and completely forgettable. He walked to the windows overlooking the city. "Today, we're the company that built a community center. We're the company that turns kitchens into classrooms and meals into hope. Do you know what that's worth in terms of brand recognition? Employee loyalty? Community partnerships?" "Pretty words," Steinberg interrupted. "But what's the bottom line?" Daniel smiled, not his usual boardroom smile, but something warmer and more genuine. "The bottom line is that in the past month, we've received inquiries from 12 other cities about replicating our community center model. 3 major corporations want to partner with us on similar projects. Our employee satisfaction scores are at an all-time high, and our recruitment numbers have increased by 30%. He returned to his seat. "More than that, we've discovered a new market, corporate social responsibility, that actually makes sense. Not token charitable donations or tax write-offs, but real community investment that builds brand loyalty and creates sustainable business relationships." Patricia Henley consulted her notes. "What about the risk factors? The association with controversial personnel?" Before Daniel could respond, the boardroom door opened. Diana walked in, followed by Jennifer Peterson and, to everyone's surprise, Bradley Hoffman. "I'm sorry to interrupt," Diana said, not looking sorry at all, "but there's something this board needs to hear." Victoria Cross raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Martinez, this is a private corporate meeting." "Mrs. Cross, with respect, this meeting is about my daughter's future and the future of a project that's affecting dozens of families. That makes it my business." Diana set a laptop on the table and opened it to reveal a video call screen. On the screen were faces Marcus recognized: parents from the community center, kids from the cooking classes, volunteers who'd been helping with the programs. "Tell them, Jeremy," Diana said to the screen. Jeremy's small face leaned closer to his camera. "Hi, Mr. Daniel. I wanted to tell the important people that the cooking center is the best thing that ever happened to my neighborhood. I learned how to make pancakes for my mom, and now she doesn't have to work hungry anymore." One by one, the families on the screen shared their stories. Single mothers learning job skills, elderly residents finding community connection, teenagers gaining confidence through cooking classes. But the most powerful testimony came from an unexpected source. "My name is Robert Hoffman," came a voice from the screen. Marcus looked up in shock to see Bradley's uncle, the man who had tried to destroy the community center, speaking to the camera. "6 weeks ago, I tried to shut down this project because I thought it threatened my business interests. I was wrong. Not just about the business. I was wrong about what makes a community valuable." Robert Hoffman's image filled the screen, his expression serious but not defensive. Since the community center opened, property values in the area have actually increased. Crime rates have dropped. Local businesses are seeing increased foot traffic. The center hasn't hurt the neighborhood, it's made it more desirable. But that's not why I'm speaking to you today, Robert Hoffman continued. I'm speaking to you because I've learned something about leadership from watching Daniel Cross and Marcus Williams. Real leaders don't just manage resources, they create value where none existed before. He paused, looking directly into the camera. Cross Industries could have written a check to charity and taken the tax deduction. Instead, you built something that changes lives daily. You could have distanced yourselves from controversy, but instead you stood behind a man who did the right thing when it was hard. Bradley Hoffman stepped forward in the boardroom. That's the kind of company I want to work for, he said quietly. Which is why I submitted my application for the assistant manager position at the community center yesterday. The room was stunned into silence. You what? Steinberg managed. I quit my job at Bellecourt. I want to work for people who understand that business success means nothing if it doesn't make the world a little better. Bradley looked directly at Marcus. I want to work for people who taught me that admitting you're wrong is the first step toward becoming someone worth respecting. Victoria Cross had been silent throughout the entire presentation. Now she stood, her expression unreadable. I've heard enough, she said quietly. Marcus felt his heart stop. This was it, the moment when everything they'd built would either survive or crumble. Motion to table the discussion of Daniel's leadership pending review of these new financial projections and community impact data. Seconded, Patricia Henley said immediately. All in favor? 7 hands went up. Only Steinberg abstained. Motion carries. Victoria Cross looked at her son with an expression that might have been pride. Daniel, you have 6 months to prove that compassionate capitalism is more than just a pretty phrase. If the community center model scales successfully and maintains profitability, this board will consider expanding the program. She gathered her papers and paused at the door. Mr. Williams, she said, looking at Marcus directly for the first time. I look forward to seeing what other miracles you can cook up. As the board members filed out, Daniel slumped back in his chair, emotionally exhausted. We did it, he whispered. No, Marcus replied, looking at Diana, Bradley, and the faces still smiling at them from the laptop screen. We all did it. And for the first time since this whole journey began, Marcus truly understood what Zara had known from the beginning. That good food, like good intentions, was always meant to be shared. 1 year later, the autumn air carried the scent of cinnamon and fresh bread as Marcus stood in the doorway of the Riverside Community Center, watching the controlled chaos of the lunch rush. What had started as one kitchen serving a handful of neighborhood kids had grown into something he could never have imagined. 3 satellite locations across the city. A job training program with an 87% placement rate. A catering business run entirely by program graduates that was not only profitable, but had a 6-month waiting list. And in the center of it all, kids like Jeremy, now confident enough to teach basic knife skills to newer students, proving every day that investing in people's potential always paid dividends. Mr. Marcus. Zara's voice cut through the kitchen noise as she bounded through the door, her school backpack bouncing on her shoulders. At 9 years old, she was taller, more confident, but still had that same bright smile that had first caught his attention outside Bellecourt restaurant. How was school, sweetheart? Amazing. Mrs. Patterson said my essay about community heroes was the best in the class. She pulled a folded paper from her backpack. Want to read it? Marcus wiped his hands and took the essay, noting the red A+ at the top. The title read, How One Cookie Changed Everything. As he read Zara's account of that night, written with the perspective of a year's worth of growth and understanding, Marcus felt his throat tighten. She'd captured not just the events, but the ripple effects. How his act of kindness had saved her family. How her parents had learned to work together again. How Bradley's redemption had shown that people could change. How the community center had become a symbol of what was possible when people chose compassion over convenience. "This is beautiful, Zara," Marcus said, handing the essay back. "But I think you might have the wrong hero." "Nah," she replied with 9-year-old certainty. "You were the first one to help. That made you the first hero. But then Daddy became a hero by building this place. And Mama became a hero by helping families who were too scared to ask for help. And Ms. Jennifer became a hero by making sure kids like me got the education we needed." She counted on her fingers. "And even Mr. Bradley became a hero when he decided to tell the truth and help instead of hurt. See? One hero helps make other heroes. That's what real heroes do." Before Marcus could respond to this profound observation from a 9-year-old philosopher, Daniel appeared in the kitchen doorway. "There you are, Princess. Ready for our special dinner? The fancy restaurant." Zara's eyes lit up. "The one with the tablecloths?" "The very one. But first, we have a stop to make." Marcus watched the exchange with curiosity. Over the past year, Daniel and Diana's relationship had evolved from tense co-parenting to genuine friendship to something that neither of them seemed ready to name yet. They worked together daily at the community center, shared dinners as a family twice a week, and had developed the kind of easy partnership that made Marcus wonder if they were slowly finding their way back to each other. "Marcus," Daniel said, "you're coming with us." "I should finish up here. Bradley can handle it." Daniel's expression was uncharacteristically nervous. "This is important." 20 minutes later, Marcus found himself in the passenger seat of Daniel's Tesla, with Zara chattering excitedly in the back about the fancy dinner they were going to have. But instead of heading toward the upscale district, Daniel drove them to a familiar location. "This is..." Marcus stared through the windshield at Bellecourt Restaurant. "The place where it all started," Daniel confirmed. "I bought it last month." "You what?" Zara leaned forward between the seats. "Daddy bought the restaurant where you used to work. We're going to make it better." Marcus looked at Daniel in shock. "You bought Bellecourt?" The previous owner was facing some financial difficulties. Apparently, word got around the culinary community about how they treated their former head chef, and several high-profile food critics started avoiding the place. Daniel's smile was slight but satisfied. Turns out having a reputation for punishing kindness is bad for business. They got out of the car and walked toward the restaurant's front entrance. Through the window, Marcus could see that the interior had been completely renovated. Warmer lighting, more open layout, and prominently displayed photos of community center activities. "Daniel, I don't understand." "You will." Daniel held the door open. "After you." Inside, Marcus was greeted by a sight that took his breath away. The restaurant was full, but not with the typical Bellecourt clientele. Instead, he saw faces from the community center, parents, kids, volunteers, even some of the Cross Industries board members who had become supporters of the project. At the center of it all stood Diana, wearing an elegant dress and a nervous smile that reminded him powerfully of Zara. "Surprise," she said softly. Jennifer Peterson appeared at Marcus's side, holding a champagne flute. "Marcus Williams," she said, her voice filled with mock formality, "you are hereby invited to the first annual Riverside Community Heroes Celebration Dinner." "But more than that," Daniel said, moving to stand beside Diana. "You're invited to witness something that's been a year in the making." Marcus watched in confusion as Daniel took Diana's hand, then knelt down on one knee. The entire restaurant fell silent. "Diana Martinez," Daniel said, his voice carrying clearly through the room. "A year ago, our pride and stubbornness nearly cost us everything that mattered. But this place, this community, these people, they've taught us that love isn't about being right. It's about choosing to build something together, even when it's hard." He pulled out a ring box, and Marcus heard Zara gasp with delight behind him. "Will you marry me?" "Again. But this time, will you marry me as partners who've learned that our family is stronger when it includes everyone who's helped us along the way?" The silence stretched for a moment that felt like an eternity. Then Diana knelt down to Daniel's level, took his face in her hands, and kissed him with the kind of desperate relief that comes after finding something you thought you'd lost forever. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, but only if Marcus agrees to cater the wedding." The restaurant erupted in cheers and applause. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face as Zara launched herself into her parents' embrace, and Jennifer's hand slipped into his. "So," Jennifer murmured in his ear, "ready for your next adventure?" Marcus looked around the restaurant, the same place where he'd been fired for an act of kindness exactly 1 year ago, now filled with people whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of that moment. Kids who were learning to cook, parents who were learning new job skills, a couple who had learned to love each other again, and a man who had learned that sometimes losing everything was the only way to find what really mattered. "I think," he said, pulling Jennifer closer, "I'm ready for all of them." As the evening wound down and families began to head home, Zara approached Marcus one more time. In her hands was a small wrapped box. "What's this, sweetheart?" "Open it." Inside was a fresh chocolate chip cookie, perfectly baked and still warm. "I made it myself in the community center kitchen," she said proudly. "I wanted to give you a whole one this time, since we don't have to save it for when we're scared anymore." Marcus took a bite of the cookie, sweet, perfectly textured, made with the kind of love that only comes from a child who has learned that kindness creates more kindness. "It's perfect," he said. "I know," Zara replied with characteristic confidence. "I learned from the best." As Marcus watched her run to rejoin her newly reunited parents, he realized that she was right, but not in the way she thought. He hadn't taught her to cook. She had taught him something far more valuable. She had taught him that sometimes the smallest acts of love create the biggest changes in the world. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, those changes come full circle to feed your soul in ways you never expected. 2 years later, the Cross Family Community Centers operated in 8 cities across 3 states. Marcus Williams was featured on the cover of Food and Community magazine as Chef of the Year for his innovative approach to combining culinary excellence with social impact. Bradley Hoffman had been promoted to regional coordinator for the program and was engaged to a social worker he'd met at a community center fundraiser. But the real measure of success could be found every Tuesday evening at 6 p.m. when the Cross family, Daniel, Diana, Zara, and their new baby son Marcus Daniel Cross, gathered around the kitchen island at the original Riverside Community Center to cook dinner together. Some traditions, they had learned, were worth keeping, and some families were worth fighting for, one meal at a time.